Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Chapter 13. The Horns of the Altar. Dillard begins this chapter telling a story about a snake. She's taking another walk, and she sees a copperhead snake. She decides to sit next to it and wait it out. For the first few pages of the chapter, she reflects on the danger of this predatory creature, as well as its beauty. In fact, as she watches it, she describes its newness, saying, "Its scales shone with newness, bright and buffed. Its body was perfect, whole and unblemished. I found it hard to believe it had not just been created on the spot, or hatched fresh from its mother, so unscathed and clean was its body, so unmarked by any passage." This is an interesting idea that she establishes at the very beginning, because this chapter is actually about being chewed on and bitten. And although she establishes the idea that the snake is whole and unblemished, throughout the rest of the chapter she revises this idea. Because after some time of watching the snake, suddenly something happens that's almost unbelievable. She sees a mosquito, which attempts to light on her a few times, and she brushes it away. And finally, it lights on the snake, and begins to drink the snake's blood. The moment of watching something that radiates a predatory danger being chewed upon by something else strikes her as so remarkable she can barely believe it, and she watches in stunned fascination until the mosquito flies away. She concludes the first section describing this by saying, "Is this what it's like? I thought then, and think now. A little blood here, a chomp there, and still we live, trampling the grass. Must everything whole be nibbled? Here was a new light on the intricate texture of things in the world, the actual plot of the present moment in time after the fall, the way we the living are nibbled and nibbling, not held aloft on a cloud in the air, but bumbling, pitted and scarred and broken through a frayed and beautiful land." This becomes the thesis of this chapter, and clearly connects to several of her other chapters she's already introduced. She touches back on the first half of the book using language such as intricate texture and the present, but re-examines those ideas after the fall, connecting back to the Night Watch chapter. Everything is being chewed on in the midst of a frayed and beautiful land. In part 2, she returns from her walk and looks to see if what she saw was actually true, that mosquitoes do bite snakes. And then she reflects on other stories, a snapping turtle covered in leeches, a mangy fox, and she begins to reflect on the world of parasites. The world is full of creatures feeding on everything else. Parasitic wasps, parasitic beetles, even parasitic moths. She describes them each in their horrific detail, noticing parasites that live in animal horns, in the fur between animal toes, feasting on blood, pus, and tears around animal eyes. As she comes towards the end of her horrific description, she says, "Let me repeat that these parasitic insects comprise 10% of all known animal species. How can this be understood? Certainly we give our infants the wrong idea of their fellow creatures in the world. Teddy bears should come with tiny stuffed bear lice. 10% of all baby bibs and rattles sold should be adorned with colorful blowflies, maggots, and screwworms. What kind of devil's tithe do we pay? What percentage of the world's species that are not insects are parasitic? Could it be, counting bacteria and viruses, that we live in a world in which half of the creatures are running from, or limping from, the other half?" She then goes on to say, "The Creator is no Puritan. A creature need not work for a living. Creatures may simply steal and suck and be blessed for all that with a share, an enormous share, of the sunlight and air. There is something that profoundly fails to be exuberant about these crawling, translucent lice and white, fat-bodied grubs, but there is an almost manic exuberance about a creator who turns them out, creature after creature after creature, and sets them buzzing and lurking and flying and swimming about." She goes on a moment later to call this a sort of rent paid by all creatures who live in the real world with us now. Wouldn't you pay it? Don't you? A little blood from the throat and wrists for the taste of air? And so she then shifts, reflecting that all of us are in this system that feeds on all of us. She then moves on from parasites to predators. And she points out that at least with predators, there's some chance of escape. She watches a bug struggle free from a spider web. And she begins to talk about her running list of those who got away. The harvestmen and grasshoppers with missing legs, the birds with missing toes or tail feathers, the fact that adult crab-eater seals almost never have complete whole hides. And with all of these creatures with bite marks out of them, how many predators are out there starving from missed meals? She begins the third section of her chapter, saying it is chomp or fast. And as she looks at chewed-up vegetation, she quotes Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. The world hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. This is a poem reflecting on Arnold's loss of faith, as he begins to feel that life has no meaning other than to hang on to those you love. And here, as Dillard looks at the pain of the world full of those who are biting and being bitten, she says, I've been there, seen it, done it, I suddenly think, and the world is old, a hungry old man, fatigued and broken past mending. Have I walked too much, aged beyond my years? I see the copperhead shining new on the rock altar over the fetid pool where the forest should grow. I see the knob-footed killdeer, the tattered butterflies and birds, the snapping turtle festooned with black leeches. There are flies that make a wound, the flies that find a wound, and a hungry world that won't wait until I'm decently dead. And with her more dismal mood, she remembers the mason jar again, and imagines all of us trapped in that mason jar, eating each other. And she recalls the story of the Israelites eating manna, a bread that fell from heaven. What happened to manna? Why doesn't everything eat manna? Into what rare air did the manna dissolve that we harry the free live things, each other? But then she begins to reflect how all of these chewed-on things are fellow survivors. And in this moment, after looking at the chewed-upon world, she begins to reflect back on those images from the first half of the book, particularly the significant image of the tree with the lights in it. As she struggles between the beauty and cruelty of the world, she says, I cannot in all honesty call the world old when I've seen it new. On the other hand, neither will honesty permit me suddenly to invoke certain experiences of newness and beauty as binding, sweeping away all knowledge. But I am thinking now of the tree with the lights in it, the cedar in the yard by the creek I saw transfigured. That the world is old and frayed is no surprise. That the world could ever become new and whole beyond uncertainty was, and is, such a surprise that I find myself referring all subsequent kinds of knowledge to it. And it suddenly occurs to me to wonder, were the twigs of the cedar I saw really bloated with galls? They probably were. They almost surely were. I have seen those cedar apples swell from that cedar's green before and since, reddish-gray, rank, malignant. All right, then. But knowledge does not vanquish mystery, or obscure its distant lights. I still now and will tomorrow steer by what happened that day, when some undeniable new spirit roared down the air, bowled me over, and turned on the lights. I stood on grass like air, air like lightning coursed in my blood, floated my bones, swam in my teeth. I've been there, seen it, been done by it. I know what happened to the cedar tree. I saw the cells in the cedar tree pulse, charged like wings beating praise. Now, it would be too facile to pull everything out of the hat and say that mystery vanquishes knowledge. Although my vision of the world of a spirit would not be altered a jot if the cedar had been purulent with galls, those galls actually do matter to my understanding of this world. Can I say, then, that corruption is one of beauty's deep blue speckles, and the frayed and nibbled fringe of the world is a talith, a prayer shawl, the intricate garment of beauty? It is very tempting, but I honestly cannot. But I can, however, affirm that corruption is not beauty's very heart, and I can, I think, call the vision of the cedar and the knowledge of those wormy quarryings twin fjords cutting into the granite cliffs of mystery, and say that the new is always present simultaneously with the old, however hidden. The tree with the lights in it does not go out. The light still shines on an old world, now feebly, now bright. In this struggle between the image of newness and beauty and the image of knowledge, of pain and suffering and cruelty, and a devouring world, she finds that both can be true simultaneously. One does not cancel the other out. Somehow the beauty and wonder of the world still shines through the pain. It's not an easy story, but it is one full of wonder. She concludes the chapter with the image from which she gets the title, Horns of the Altar. She referenced horns, and even italicized the word, earlier in the chapter when talking about things full of parasites. There are parasitic moths that live on animal horns. Now she connects to the Jewish image of the altar. Hebrew altar had horns on it, and in her final image she imagines herself being sacrificed on this altar. I am a sacrifice bound with cords to the horns of the world's rock altar, waiting for worms. I take a deep breath, I open my eyes. Looking, I see there are worms in the horns of the altar like live maggots in amber. There are shells of worms in the rock and moths flapping at my eyes. A wind from no place rises. A sense of the real exalts me. The cord's loose. I walk on my way. As she waits to be sacrificed to the devouring parasitic world, she finds that the sacred altar is also full of parasites. And then a wind sets her free. Somehow she manages to accept both her position in the world and also the world itself as being full of parasites, and still finds freedom in that moment. This wind is going to continue in the next chapter, and continue the image of the wind that we've been carrying through this book. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.